Alright, so let's dive into arrays. An array is a data structure that holds multiple items of the same type or multiple types. The data is stored in a contiguous memory location and the values are mutable, which means they can be changed. The size is fixed and can be accessed by using the index. The index is the location of the item or the element within the array. I'll place a picture so you guys can get a better understanding on how an array looks like. So let's create our first array. So I want to create an array with names within it. So I'm going to call it names. And I'm going to make that equal to an array. So to create an array in Kotlin, you use the array of with parentheses. This is to let Kotlin know that we're about to create an array and we're about to add elements within the parentheses to start defining the elements of an array. So let's start writing down some names. So the first one I want to use is Joey. Second one I want to use is Valentina. The second one or third one I want to create is Maria. And let me fix the A. And the fourth one I'm going to put is George. Now I want everybody to also have an age. So we're going to put another array called ages. We're going to make that equal to an array. Now an array could specify a specific type just like a variable. In this case, above, we let Kotlin infer the types. So in this case, if there's only strings within this array, we let Kotlin infer that there's only going to be, or we let Kotlin infer that it's going to only be a string. But you could also define other types. You could put a 1 in here. You could put a true in here. Kotlin will just infer that this is an array of string, integer, and boolean. So it is possible. But if we want to make it specific, and then we remove this, we just add in some anchor tags and we place the data type of what we want to specify. So in this case, I'm using ages, so I want to use int. And let's close that anchor tag, open up parentheses, and let's start defining some ages. So for Joey, he's going to be 22. For Valentina, she's going to be 36. For Maria, she's going to be 20 or 28. And for George, not so curious, but he's going to be, let's say 45. All right. Now, you can retrieve a value from an array by using an index. So with arrays, we start at 0 up to the length -1. So in this case, we have an array of size 4. As a plane go over my house. But we have an array of size 4. It's Joey, Valentina, Marie, and George. But since the array starts at 0, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So to retrieve George, we will have to use the index of 3. So let me print this out so it can make more sense. We'll print out a name and we'll print out an age. So let's put println. And then let's put name. And use string templates. Since it's going to be retrieving a value from array, we're going to have to use the string template for expressions, and we're going to place square brackets. So to retrieve a value, you have to specify the name that you're holding the array, put square brackets, and then place the index. So since we want to retrieve the last value of names, or we want to retrieve George, we'll use the index of 3. Because like I said, it is starting at 0 to retrieve the initial value in the array, and then it increments by 1. So that means the last value of the array for names will be 3, and that will be George. And I want to retrieve the age of George, and that is 45. So I'll print out age, and we'll also use a string template for expressions and use age. Ages is plural, but we want to just retrieve 1. So we'll open up a square brackets. We'll place the index of 3 to retrieve the last value, and then let's run that. And you guys will see that it says name is George and age is 45. Now, a sure way to make sure you retrieve the last value of this array of ages, or any array, is that you could take ages, or you could take the array name, then put dot size, which will retrieve the size of the array, and put -1. Because like I said, since it starts at 0 and it ends at the size -1, this will guarantee, that you're retrieving the right last element in the array. So let me just do this for names as well. Put dot size, and then put -1 or -1. And if I run this again, we are good to go. But you also got to be careful with arrays because of the fact we could have an exception. Now, what if we try to retrieve a value that is beyond the scope of this array? So in this case, what if we try to take names.size, which in this case will return 4, but we don't have an item within this array that has an index of 4. So if we try to run this, we will receive this array index out of bounds exception. And you don't want this. This can be very dangerous because this is a runtime exception. You won't get this during compilation. It's only when you're trying to retrieve something. So say for instance your application is running and you're thinking it's perfectly fine, but once that one thing triggers, it will break the application. You don't want that. So you got to make sure that you pay attention to this type of stuff because it can break your application. Now, we can also change a value. Like I said, arrays are mutable in the sense that we can change the values within the array. We can't add a size, or we can't add another item to the array because of the fact that once you create an array, it stays the same size, but you can change the values within the array. So say for instance, we want to change the name George to, Joshua. We can take names, we can open up a brackets, we can grab the last item or last element using the names dot size -1. We can make that equal to Joshua, and then if we run this, this should be perfect. Joshua and his age is equal to 45. Now you're probably asking yourself, or if you guys don't understand that yet, but it says Val's names. Doesn't that mean that you can't change it? Not with arrays. That just means when it says Val, it just means that we can't change what's already being held after we assign it. So in this case, we already assigned names with the array of. So as long as we're not changing it to, a string individually or a number, is fine. But as long as we're changing just the array or the values within the array that's already being assigned to names, then we're good to go. And you guys see that it was mutable, so we were able to change George to Joshua. So perfect. So you guys get an understanding. If you want to specify a specific type to an array, you can specify it with a anchor tag. If you want to grab the last item within a array, you can use the size -1. You guys got to be careful with array out of bounds index when your application is running, because it's a runtime error. So you could just be running your application perfectly fine, and then once a user tries to access something that they're not supposed to access, it could break. So you got to be careful for that. All right, so we're not just restricted to just one individual arrays. We can have arrays within arrays. We can have multidimensional arrays. So let's create that. Let's have one. It's called numbers, because we're just gonna put an array of numbers. And we're gonna call this array of. Open that up, and then we're gonna have another array of. That's gonna make another row of arrays. Now we're gonna let's make 2. Let's make a square. So then we need to just start defining some numbers within here. We'll just call this 1 and 2. And then we'll just call this 3 and 4. So as you guys can see, it's a square. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, how do we retrieve 3? So it's the same concept as before. To retrieve the first value or the first element, it'll be 0. But in this case, it's multi-dimensional. So the first row will be 0. This second row will be 1. But how do we retrieve the values within the columns? Now, in this case, we have the first row and the second row, but the columns is the same. In this case, it's the same logic. So if we want to retrieve 3, we're in the second row, right? Which is 1 because array start at 0. So it'll be 1. And if we want to retrieve the first value, we'll just have to use 1 and 0 because to get the first element within this second row, it'll be 0. You're probably thinking to yourself, man, this really doesn't make sense. So let's print this out so you guys get a better understanding. So if we take numbers and we open up the first brackets and we want to retrieve a value in the second row, but since array starts at 0, we got to subtract 1. So in this case, if we try to get something from the second row, it'll be 1. And if we want to retrieve the first value in the second row, we have to use 0. Now, if we run this, we should expect to see 3. Boom. Now, if we want to retrieve a value in the first row, but we want to get the second element in the first row, which is 2, we just got to change this to 0 because this is the first row, and we want to retrieve the second value. We just got to make this second one a 1. And if we run this, we shall see 2. Now, you can use for loops to easily go through these one by one, but as you guys can see, there's a lot of things that you could do with arrays. You just got to be careful when you use them.